Hi, I'm Sissy and I'm Timothy's widow. I want to thank you for joining me today as we begin our look at grief terminology. Grieving spouses and those supporting them often find themselves immersed in a world of grief terminology and concepts that may have been unfamiliar to them before our loss. We're suddenly hearing new words, phrases, and concepts that sometimes make us feel as though we're on an alien planet, trying to learn a new language and how to communicate. So you may be asking yourself, why is learning and understanding grief terminology so important? Well, learning and understanding grief terminology can be very important not only for the grieving spouse, but for those who are standing with them, supporting them as they navigate the grief journey. One of the ways in which learning and understanding grief terminology is important is in understanding the grieving process. Grief is a complex and unique experience for every individual. Learning the terminology associated with grief stages and coping mechanisms helps grieving spouses and their supporters better comprehend the emotional and psychological aspects of the grieving process. This understanding can foster empathy and patience during the grief journey. Another reason that learning and understanding grief terminology is so important is that it helps with validating feelings and experiences. Grief terminology provides a framework to articulate and validate the wide range of emotions and reactions experienced by the grieving individual. By being familiar with these terms, both the grieving spouse and their supporters can express and recognize the significance of various feelings, thoughts, and behaviors related to grief. Learning and understanding grief terminology can also help with improved communication. Grief often leaves individuals struggling to express themselves adequately. Having a common vocabulary enables more effective communication between the grieving spouses and their supporters. It allows them to better articulate their needs, seek appropriate support, and avoid misunderstandings. Another area where learning and understanding grief terminology can prove to be valuable is in identifying resources and support. Grief terminology is used in various support communities, counseling sessions, and written materials on grief and bereavement. Familiarity with these terms enables the grieving spouse and their supporters to access relevant resources, join support groups, and seek professional assistance more effectively. Understanding grief terminology can be very useful. It provides empowerment in decision making. During the grieving process, individuals may encounter choices related to funeral arrangements, legal matters, or therapeutic interventions. Understanding grief terminology empowers both the grieving spouse and their supporters to make informed decisions and participate actively in the processes surrounding their loss. Another area that learning and understanding grief terminology can prove to be very valuable in is in building resilience and coping strategies. Grief terminology often includes concepts related to coping mechanisms and resilience building techniques. Understanding the terminology helps the grieving spouse and their supporters both to learn more and to understand more about these coping mechanisms and strategies. They can learn how to identify healthy and appropriate strategies and find applicable ways to navigate their own unique grief journey in a manner that is best suited for them. Learning and understanding grief terminology can also be very valuable to understand enhanced support capabilities. Supporters of grieving spouses who learn grief terminology can offer more compassionate and sensitive assistance to the grieving spouse during their grief journey. Also, understanding concepts like anticipatory grief, disenfranchised grief, or complicated grief enables supporters of grieving spouses to respond more thoughtfully to the specific needs and emotions of the grieving individual. Also, learning and understanding grief terminology helps promote self-awareness. Grief terminology can foster self-awareness in both the grieving spouses and their supporters. It helps them recognize their own emotional reactions and potential biases, allowing for a more thoughtful and empathetic approach in providing support. So, as we're discovering, learning and understanding grief terminology really is important for both grieving spouses and for those who are standing with them to support them as they navigate their grief journey. Overall, having at least a basic comprehension of grief terminology is essential for navigating the grief journey. It enhances communication, validates emotions, and empowers individuals to find effective ways to cope with their loss while fostering a more supportive and understanding environment. As a grieving widow, I've encountered many new words and phrases in my own grief journey. I have found it so helpful in communicating with my supporters and others when they do have at least a basic understanding of grief terminology. As a grieving widow, you have my heartfelt thanks if you have chosen to stand with and stand by a grieving spouse and provide them the support and love that they need as they navigate their own grief journey. I want to thank you so very much for taking time to join me as we begin looking at, describing, and defining the terminology, phrases, and concepts that are associated with grief and the grief journey. Please consider liking and sharing this video since it helps support the growth of my channel and my mission for other grieving spouses. Go ahead and subscribe and hit notify so that you'll know when the next video for grief terminology is available. I've been Sissy, and I'm wishing you hope, light, and love. Until the next time, my friend.